In Rajasthan, India, a city where no one is allowed to remain after sunset. No lights, no residents, no one dares to sleep there. Bhangarh.
During the day, humans walk into me with cameras, laughter, and curiosity. They pass through my cracked stone walls and call me a ruin. They touch the cold stones, film short videos, and tell each other stories about curses and spirits wandering in the dark. But when the sun goes down, everything begins returning to its true form. I am not a fortress. I am a memory that was never allowed to rest. For hundreds of years, people have come here asking, is this place haunted? But the real question should be, what scares humans more than death itself? Not ghosts. Being forgotten. I did not die because of a curse. I died because humans abandoned me, one by one, in silence. And the most terrifying thing here is not what still wanders through the darkness. It is what once lived here, and is no longer remembered by anyone. But to understand why I was abandoned, you must return to the moment I was created, not as a city, but as a tool. I once believed I would last forever. I still remember the day the first stones were laid upon the dry lands of Rajasthan in India. Back then, there were no massive walls, no palaces, no ghost stories whispered by humans like today. There was only the sound of hammers striking stone, the cheers of workers, and the ambition of kings who wanted to build a city that would never be forgotten. But the truth is, they did not build me for people to live in. They built me to control. Bhangarh stood between important trade routes, where goods, spices, gold, and power constantly passed through. I was the eye watching over this land, a fortress created to observe, protect, and display the strength of those who ruled it. Every wall within me was built not only from stone, but from ambition. They raised me in the middle of the valley as a symbol of power. Every day, crowds of people arrived. Builders, merchants, soldiers, artists, priests, all of them helped transform me into one of the most magnificent cities in the region. Stone roads stretched across the marketplace. Temples were carved with such precision that even sunlight made them appear to glow. During the day, the city echoed with the sounds of trading, children running through narrow alleys, and music rising from royal ceremonies. At night, hundreds of torches lit the streets, making the entire Bhangarh Fort look like a giant flame burning in the middle of the dark desert. I once watched kings, standing on palace balconies, believing they had conquered time itself. They believed these walls would stand forever. They believed their names would live on through me. But humans always make the same mistake. They forget that every empire, no matter how glorious, will eventually be swallowed by time. I watched countless faces that once laughed within this city disappear from the world. Children grew old, proud kings turned into dust, and the most terrifying part was that none of them realized the end was approaching. At first, the signs were small, strange rumors spreading through the markets, nervous glances, nights that felt longer than usual, but nobody truly paid attention. Because when a city stands at the height of its power, people believe it is untouchable. I believed that too, until I began hearing the silence growing inside my own walls. Before my first walls were built, this place already belonged to someone else. Not kings, not armies, but an old sage named Guru Balunath. He lived alone on the rocky hill, overlooking the valley, the place that would later become Bhangarh Fort. The local people said he had been there for a very long time, so long that no one even remembered when he first appeared. Some said he was a holy man, others believed he understood things humans were never meant to know. But whatever the truth was, even the most powerful kings did not dare disrespect him. I still remember the day the first men came to survey this land. They stood in the middle of the valley, pointing toward the mountains, saying this place would become the greatest city in Rajasthan, India. They spoke of gold, armies, power, and the trade routes that would pass through this land. But when they looked up at the hill, they saw him sitting there, silent, watching everything below. No one knows how the conversation that day truly happened. But in the end, the sage gave only one condition. Build whatever you wish, but never let the shadow of your palace touch the place where I live. That was all. No gold, no power, just a shadow. And humans agreed, because sometimes, the simplest conditions are the most terrifying ones. During the first years, they truly kept their promise. The buildings were constructed lower than originally planned. Royal engineers even changed the design of the city, just to ensure the sunlight would never cast the palace's shadow upon that hill. For a very long time, everything remained peaceful. The city grew richer and richer. The markets overflowed with people. Music echoed through the temples. And I began to believe that humans had finally learned to respect the things they did not understand. But then, power always changes people. A new king rose to the throne. Younger, more ambitious. He did not want only a wealthy city. He wanted a symbol that would force every other kingdom to bow before him. And to achieve that, he wanted the palace to rise above everything else. high enough to be seen from far away across the desert. The elders of the city began to worry. They repeated the sage's warning, but power rarely likes listening to warnings. The construction continued. Layer after layer of stone rose higher each day, and then, that afternoon finally came. I still remember the burning red sunlight covering the valley. The shadow of the palace slowly began to stretch, quietly, silently, until it touched the place where Guru Balunath lived. There was no thunder, no earth splitting apart. Only a strange silence falling over the entire city. People said the sage stood up for the first time after many years of meditation. He stared at the palace for a very long time, as if looking at something already dead. Then he spoke. "You have chosen arrogance. This city will not survive for long."
Where did the curse begin?
Before the first walls were ever built, and deep inside a cave hidden within the Aravalli Mountains, there lived a reclusive sage named Baba Bhalnath. I still remember the day he appeared. The sound of hammers echoed through the air. Dust covered the sky. He stood upon a tall rock, looking down at the walls being built, and said, "If you continue, this city will never belong to the living." The nobles laughed. The construction continued, but after that day, the nights here began to change. Workers no longer slept near the foot of the mountain. They said that just before dawn, faint chanting could be heard coming from the cave, even though no one had ever seen Baba Bhalnath leave it. Some nights, the dogs in the camp suddenly began howling before crawling beneath the stone carts in fear. Horses refused to pass through the western side after sunset. Some people swore they saw flickering firelights on the mountainside at midnight, but whenever the guards climbed up to investigate, there was nothing there except stone and wind. Then, one night, the wells ran dry. Livestock began dying in large numbers. A group of workers climbed toward the cave area to mine stone. The next morning, they were found unconscious at the foot of the mountain. None of them were ever able to speak again. The strangest part was that their hair had turned grey overnight. No one ever knew what they had seen up there. People called it a curse. But the terrifying thing is not that someone warned them beforehand. It is that humans always choose not to listen and then call the consequences fate. But the warning was only the beginning. The thing that truly changes fate always comes from humans.
Who was Ratnavati?
Then she appeared, Ratnavati. I had seen thousands of people walk across my stone roads. Arrogant kings, blood-stained warriors, merchants carrying gold and silver from all over the world. But no one had ever made an entire city fall silent with a single glance the way she did. People said Ratnavati was so beautiful that even the sunlight wanted to linger on her face and reveal her. Every time she appeared in the royal market, conversations would slowly fade away. Merchants lowered their heads. Even the soldiers standing guard would unconsciously turn to look at her. Not only because of her beauty, but because she carried something very few powerful people possess: kindness. She often disguised herself as a commoner to walk through my markets. She preferred listening to stories from the streets rather than sitting inside the cold palace. I still remember the sound of her laughter echoing between stalls selling silk and spices. It was the sound that made this entire city feel alive. But from that very moment, someone else began watching her from the darkness. Singhia. People called him a sorcerer, but in truth, he was merely a man consumed by obsession with power. He lived at the edge of the city, where houses slowly gave way to rocky hills and darkness. No one knew where he had learned those dark arts. People only knew they avoided looking directly into his eyes. They said Singhia's gaze felt as if it could see straight through another person's soul. And then he saw Ratnavati. From that moment on, everything began to change. He did not love her. Love does not make people want to possess another person's soul. What he wanted was to own her as proof of his own power. A princess whom even kings could not touch, forced to kneel before him. That obsession grew stronger every single day. I remember the nights he stood upon the hills, staring toward the palace, saying nothing, only watching, like a beast, waiting for the perfect moment. And eventually, that day came. One ordinary afternoon, like any other, Ratnavati sent her servant to the market to buy perfume oil. It seemed like nothing more than a small moment among thousands of events happening in the city every day. But sometimes, the greatest tragedies begin with the smallest things. Singhia had already prepared for it. He secretly cast a spell upon the bottle of oil. People said he whispered ancient incantations while doing it. He believed that the moment Ratnavati touched the liquid, her mind would belong to him forever. No will, no freedom, only absolute submission.
What caused you to slowly die?
After Singhia's death, everything inside me began to change. Not the kind of change humans could notice immediately. The sky did not turn red, thunder did not tear across the city. Everything happened slowly, like a disease silently spreading through the body of someone who still believes they are healthy. During the day, my markets were still crowded. Merchants still called out to one another across the stone streets. Soldiers still patrolled around the palace. But when night fell, I began hearing different sounds. Sounds that did not belong to a normal city. Footsteps echoing through empty hallways. Wooden doors creaking open without wind. Some soldiers swore they saw a figure standing on the palace balcony before dawn, only for it to disappear the moment they approached. At first, people tried to explain everything away. They said it was only the wind passing through cracks in the stone. They said the soldiers had stayed awake too long and imagined things. But the more incidents happened, the larger the fear became. And the most terrifying thing about fear is that it spreads faster than any disease. All it takes is one person claiming they heard crying in the darkness, and the next day, the entire city begins listening to the darkness. All it takes is one person saying, "This place has been cursed," and every pair of eyes begins looking at each other with suspicion. I could feel it inside every one of my walls. The atmosphere of Bhangarh began to change. The evenings no longer carried music deep into the night. Shops closed earlier. People avoided walking through empty alleys after dark. Even those who once mocked the curse began lowering their voices whenever Singhi's name was mentioned. But then, the thing that truly killed me finally arrived. War. An attack fell upon Bhangarh like a storm in the desert. I still remember that night. War horns echoed through the darkness. Red torches appeared beyond the walls like the eyes of monsters. People ran through the stone streets that were once filled with laughter. Soldiers rushed onto the walls in desperation. Steel clashed against steel across the valley. Then the fires began. The first houses collapsed beneath screams. Smoke covered the sky. I watched the people who once lived inside me flee with terror in their eyes. Children became separated from their parents in the chaos. Mothers carried their children through burning markets. Soldiers who knew they would die still stood before the gates. And among all those sounds, the most haunting thing was helplessness. I was a fortress. I was built to protect people. But that night, I could not save anyone. I could only stand there and watch my city slowly die in flames. One room after another became empty. One street after another fell silent. The screams faded hour by hour, until only the sound of fire and desert wind remained. Then morning came, and for the first time in my existence, I heard complete silence. No merchants shouting, no guards walking the streets, no children running through the alleys, only corpses, ashes, and doors left wide open, as if the entire city had fled from its own fear. The survivors began leaving, one family at a time. No one wanted to remain in a cursed city. No one wanted to sleep in rooms where crying had echoed through the night. And so they abandoned me, one by one, in silence. In the years that followed, sand and wind began swallowing the city. Walls slowly cracked apart. Markets turned into piles of broken stone. Temples once filled with light became nothing but darkness and dust. But the strange thing is, even after no one remained here, I was never truly empty. Centuries passed, and humans returned once again, with cameras, flashlights, and curiosity. They walked through the gates of Bhangarh Fort and laughed about ghost stories. During the day, they called me a ruin. But when darkness fell, I watched their confidence begin to disappear. I heard their heartbeats quicken as the wind moved through the stone hallways. Some kept turning around because they felt someone staring at them. Some claimed they heard a woman crying from inside the ruined palace. Some ran away in the middle of the night without being able to explain why. I do not know whether spirits truly exist here or not, but I know memories never die. A place once filled with ambition, love, blood, betrayal, and fear will always leave something behind. And sometimes, what truly haunts humans is not ghosts, but the feeling that they are standing among the ruins of lives that once existed and then vanished from the world as if they had never been here. If one day you stand before my gates, after the sun has disappeared, listen carefully. Perhaps you will hear the wind, perhaps only the sound of desert sand, or perhaps it is me, telling this story. Once again, screen face to black. Do not remain after sunset.